any student that's listening to this wondering, what does this mean for me? You know, I have grown so much as a person from 18 to now 23 years old, and I can thank the UTC for that.
Welcome to the Ask You Telling Our Story podcast. I am your host, Leticia Maldonado, a proud first-generation college graduate, a passionate advocate of higher education, and a proud member of the Postsecondary Value Team at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. In this series, we share stories from state colleges and universities that have taken bold steps to foster greater accessibility and affordability for underrepresented communities. We will get an inside look at how they are closing completion gaps, connecting students to viable career opportunities, and creating a more just, equitable society. Greetings to all of our listeners. Joining us today from Colorado State University Pueblo, also known as CSU Pueblo, is Dr. Timothy Mottet, President of the institution, Dr. Kristyn White Davis, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Extended Studies, and Mikayla Lerch, CSU Pueblo alumna. Today we'll be talking about CSU Pueblo's University Track Centers, also known as UTCs, and how they're turning the dream of pursuing a college degree into a reality for underserved high school students. As a graduate of Colorado State University myself, I am particularly excited and thrilled to have you here today. Dr. Mottet, Dr. White Davis, Mikayla, welcome.
Thank you, Leticia. We're delighted to be here. Thank you for having us.
I echo his thanks. Thank you. This is very wonderful.
Thank you.
Dr. Mottet, I'd like to start with you. I want to take a moment to express our gratitude at Ask You for CSU Pueblo's commitment to students, and in particular for your service to the Postsecondary Value Presidential Task Force. I think it's important to share with our audience that under your leadership, CSU Pueblo has been featured for a great accomplishment, and that is leading the way in post-secondary value work and increasing the return on investment for students who attend your institution. So on behalf of Ask You, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Leticia. It's been our honor, and Ask You is a group that I believe in. I believe in its mission, and it's easy to do this work. So thank you.
Dr. White Davis, I'd like to turn to you for a second now and ask you how it all started. What is a UTC? If you can provide an overview of the program and its benefits.
So a UTC is basically a physical home base inside a high school where a CSU Pueblo or a college staff member is helping facilitate a post-secondary culture in a high school. So there's, a person who works for CSU Pueblo is helping facilitate completing applications, answering financial aid questions, like developing a safe space to learn about college and what colleges are out there and why to go to college. Rather than like where you think of colleges are going into high schools often like through the admissions counselors, they meet in the counseling office, but it is a sort of at a set time. And this is where we actually have a office, or in some places it could be as small as a single office inside the counseling center, or like in the case with Mikayla, the high school gave us a whole classroom, and it's like a big open space that was like kind of a hangout space for students. But it basically is a designated space where a CSU Pueblo staff member works to help track students to a post-secondary opportunity, either at CSU Pueblo or another institution. And so that's the idea entirely. And they're there the entire day. So students can come when it's convenient for them, and they can come multiple times even. It's not like a one-time opportunity to interact with the track center coordinator. Tim, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Leticia, I was going to also just say it's really a small admissions office, but it's embedded in a high school. And that's another way of thinking about these centers.
When were the UTCs launched? My understanding is that the UTCs were launched pre-pandemic. What impact did that have, if any, on the program? And how did you overcome that setback?
Thinking back, I'm fairly certain that we tried to, launch our partnership with the districts in like fall of 2017. And I think the opening of the first two like home base or physical spaces was in spring of 2018. And we hired two track center coordinators at that time. And they worked directly under the executive director of admissions and with counselors. So they home base, the counselors home base out of the high schools. They don't home base out of our office or on campus. And then, during the pandemic, I would just say what was, I think, wonderful is that everything shifted to Zoom, but that included the track center coordinator resource. They held Zoom appointments with students. They worked with our staff to make sure that they were trying to answer questions. A lot of it happens on Zoom, and it seems like, it didn't feel as it, but it was so lucky that we did that before the pandemic because they knew of us. The counselors knew to relay this resource to students. There was a QR code that could to webinars, and it kind of became, there was we were just sort of inching into that space pre-pandemic, and then students sort of thought oh, okay, all right, I meet with my counselor on Zoom in a way that was they had to learn a new space. And I think that's always challenging. But I think it's also now lend us to facilitating different support at our multiple high schools, right? So if the counselor is at at South High School and a student from East really needs to meet with them, they now there's a Zoom office hours space that we've sort of developed a different strategy because we've evolved a little bit, thinking that we can be accessible without being in person, but also it was challenging because people are just so tense, and and also you have Zoom fatigue. Why would you want to get in a Zoom after you've been in high school classes on Zoom all day? It was a challenge, and we've had to grow a little bit as an institution, in a variety of ways, just like everybody had. We had to grow as individuals, but also grow as staff and grow our resources and facilitate better support. So we did have some office space designated on campus for the coordinators to come to campus when they needed to. And now we've actually kept that so that on Fridays when we don't have school, the high schools are not in session, they come and connect with our staff as well. So that's been a different change.
I read that there was a lot of intentionality when establishing the UTCs, and particularly in the hiring of staff and ensuring that staff were bilingual and that students can see themselves in the staff. Can you please share what are other important elements that were considered when establishing the UTCs?
Well, I think at the visioning table, it was kind of the conversation of how do we get more students to see college as a viable opportunity for their future. And that means being accessible. And so how could we be more accessible? We go to all the events they ask us to, or we're coming to all the admissions events, but how could we just make it easy, right? And I think that was the main focus was, well, can we just get in there all the time, so that the students will come when they're ready? And I think that's the really pivotal piece. It's not that we are kind of waiting for them to come in, but also being more connected to high school counselors specifically, so that counselors could be oh, hey, you should just walk down the hall. Just kind of like being directed easily to a resource that you didn't have to wait for. Oh, you're in a passing period? Go now, when you have more time. So I think it's a twofold piece, and that was the original intention of the vision group. And then with Dr. Mottet's leadership and working with our local superintendents, they seemed really receptive to the idea that, they also want to see more kids go to college, but their resources are pretty thin. So, they seem to be excited and willing to host us. So basically the secondary spaces are hosting us, letting us use their space to help facilitate students going to college.
How many students have been served by the UTCs since their inception?
So I think that what's really important about developing evidence of the track center's effectiveness is having as effective data tracking as you can, which is we have a a digital device where students can check in and identify what they're coming to see the track center coordinator about. Sometimes sometimes students don't fill out the form, and sometimes students come multiple times. So data tracking is difficult, but I will tell you, just as a metric for us to evaluate, last year we met with every single senior at least one time. And we're going to try to make that a goal for the track center coordinator year over year. Then we start meeting with juniors, and then every junior at least one time, and then every sophomore at least one time. And then, hopefully we get to a place where we're meeting with a freshman and then a sophomore at least once a year until they come in as a senior ready to fully evaluate. What I would also say is, if you're planning to do this for yourselves, think early about how you want to measure the interactions, how you're trying to track what the question, how many times they meet. You want to be careful about the data, because it is an important part of defending this practice, because the investment is important, and showing that it works. So I would encourage you to develop a data tracking mechanism as much as possible.
We have the privilege of having a UTC alumna with us today. So Mikayla, I'm glad that you were able to join us. You shared with me in a previous conversation that you went through the UTC program and that it was very successful for you. As a high school student, how did you hear about the UTCs, and what prompted you to seek their services?
Absolutely. I think the very first time I heard about the UTCs, Dr. Mottet and everyone from CSU Pueblo was actually at Pueblo West High School, where I went for the opening of it. And it was a whole thing. I mean, there was the news there was video there was a bunch of people there. And all of us were kind of wondering, what is going on in our hallway right now? It sounds like this is like a big celebration. We have a new office facility. And I believe that was either the end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year. But I knew that it was going to be there. And the woman that was the UTC coordinator for Pueblo West High School, her name was Mallory Weiss. She was in the hallways all the time talking to us, getting us to go into the UTC. And she had such big energy, and I feed off of that a lot. So having someone that I could already build immediate rapport with was awesome. And I eventually was in there virtually every single day as a senior. I knew I wanted to go. At first, I thought I was going to go elsewhere. For a Pueblo native, I was super gung-ho on going outside of Pueblo, and then I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Mottet. I was, I believe, 17 or 18, and so meeting Mallory Weiss, I knew I wanted to go to CSU Pueblo eventually. So she helped me with, oh my gosh, all of it. The application process. I applied for the Kane Scholarship, which is a full ride scholarship that I eventually received, but would not have done so without the help of the UTC coordinator, Mallory. So I was in there brainstorming all of the topics that I could write about for that essay, rewriting it 5 million times, overthinking it dozens of times, and making sure that it was pristine. And even unrelated to college, we could just go in there, rant about the day. She would listen. She was kind of the big sister I never had, which was really cool. And to speak on the rapport and the value of having someone like that, not only just guide you through the college experience, but just life, makes it so much easier to transition from high school to college, just because you have someone, a representative that's there that can connect you. They have had experience there. So that was super reassuring as I was going throughout that program. But I registered for all my classes through the UTC. I learned about all the other scholarships I could apply for through the UTC. Applied, obviously, to college through the UTC. They were the know all, see all, be all for college for CSU Pueblo, and it was amazing. And so many of my classmates used it too. It was really robust. We loved going and just talking to Mallory, and she actually came to my high school graduation party and gave me her own CSU Pueblo hoodie by the end of our time together. So I still have it to this day. She wrote me a really nice letter and gave me some CSU Pueblo swag. So it was really awesome. We eventually established a really good relationship. And even to this day, now that I'm kind of working in a similar capacity, it's cool to be able to know the value that experience had on me and be able to pay it forward to prospective students as well.
Tell us more about the impact that the UTC program had on you, and how do you see it helping other students who come from a similar background as yours?
Oh, absolutely. It opened my eyes to so many different opportunities at CSU Pueblo. It also opened my eyes to a completely different career path. I'm very certain I wanted to go to into law school, and I didn't really know what path to take with that. And so I originally thought I wanted to do psychology, maybe go into some child advocacy law. But through the University Track Center, I spoke with Mallory about what it meant to be a social worker and the type of law that I actually really had interest in. We talked about my values in advocacy and social justice and all of those. So we talked a lot about that. And she said, well, I think the social work program might be a little bit better for you. So we explored that. I actually ended up being a social work major, loved it. And the impact that the UTC had on me was profound. I got to go to college for free because of the help that the University Track Center gave to me. I got a full ride scholarship, which was awesome. You know, I still remember the day that I got the call from, her name's Sandy Lundhall. She runs the foundation scholarships at the university. And I remember running to Mallory saying, we did it. You know, I got the Kane scholarship. I'm going to college for free, which was so awesome. And all of the days that I was in there really paid off. And in retrospect, you know, she really helped me convey my story and what my essay was about. Which if you ask me now, I wrote about leadership in some capacity, but yes, it was awesome. I got to learn about CSU Pueblo's programs and a university where I didn't think I was going to go at first because I was super ready to be 18 and think I could run the world and go elsewhere, only to find out that the best university for me was right in my backyard. And I probably would not have realized that if I did not have the connection that I had with Mallory as the UTC. So it was awesome. And I would go to CSU Pueblo 10 times over if I could.
One of the things that stood out to me in reading about CSU Pueblo is that it's identified as a people's university. What does that mean, and what does it mean to you, Dr. Mottet, to be a president of a people's university?
Yeah, so the People's University, we went through a visioning process early on in my presidency where the charge was to develop a bold vision that our community could get behind and that our board of governors could get behind and support. And I remembered asking our chancellor, what does support mean? I said, does it mean money? Does it mean cheerleading? What does it mean? And he said, no, it means money. And so I knew that it was important that we get this right. And so the People's University is what emerged through a task force, a group of individuals who went to work and developed this concept of the People's University. Um, and it comes from a variety of different places. First is Pueblo is in the name of our university. The Latin root of Pueblo is people. We are located in Pueblo, Colorado, and in the late 1800s, we are a big steel mill town, and our population, we were known as being very receptive to immigrant populations to help fuel the steel mill, and we were referred to as the People's Town. And then in the 60s and the 70s, regional comprehensive universities were referred to as the People's University. So we took these three kind of historical and cultural references, and we started realizing, I think there's something to that. But what does it mean? The meaning is there's a story that I wanted to share that I think also captures the meaning. I taught at a school on the border in Deep South Texas. And in Deep South Texas, I was at a Dairy Queen. I was having lunch. And I heard a Mexican-American family, a father, tell a daughter next to me as I was enjoying, I have no idea what I was eating at the time, but he told his daughter that the university across the street was not for them, it was for other people. And I remembered that clearly, and that has remained with me and has resonated with me. And when I became a president, I realized I wanted to be a president for a university that was for all people and not just some, but a university that worked aggressively and assertively to welcome all different types of people into the university. So that is a story that I think influenced me and my thinking early on in my presidency. What does it mean to me personally? It means an opportunity. We are a university that is interested in the best and the brightest students, and we can compete for the best and the brightest students. But when you go into a lot of our high schools today, there is a large group of high school students who have not been touched. They've not been touched because of, it could be their educational system, the quality of teaching. It could be because their mom and dads never went to college. And what we do know is that intelligence is not limited to a zip code. It is equally distributed. There are bright students in that classroom who have the ability to be successful at college. It is our job to capture them, to introduce the experience, bring them into a university, and open their ideas to an opportunity that they never thought about before. And so it is really, it's connecting with students on where they are. And a lot of these students don't see themselves as college material. A lot of people in the community do not see them as college material. But when we talk to them and meet them and look at their scores and what their interests, they've got the ability and they've got the motivation and they're hungry, and we want to make it a possibility. I have another story that I think also captures this. This is important to me because I'm one of those students. So I went home recently, and I went into the nursing home where my mother was living at the time, and my high school teacher, Mr. Weller, is in the room next to my mom. And my mom said, "You need to go next door and see Mr. Weller," my high school history teacher. And Mr. Weller said the following to me. He said, "So your mom tells me you're a university president." And I said, "I am, Mr. Weller." And he said, "Huh." He said, "I gave up on predicting who was going to be successful in life." He said, "Some of the best and the brightest fizzled, and some of the late bloomers have really gone on to do wonderful things." And so I'm a late bloomer, if you will, and an opportunity was given to me. I took advantage of that opportunity, and so I'm paying it forward by leading a university that sees the potential in students. And what's easy is pulling together a leadership team and a community who is behind that vision.
Wow, thank you for sharing those stories. That's
You bet.
very inspirational and touching to hear. You know, I read that prior to the establishment of the UTCs, the college going percentage of high school students in Colorado's districts 60 and 70 was 50%. So, what was that like for you as a president to see these numbers, and particularly within the context of the stories that you just shared?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I noticed, to me, when I saw that, I think this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity where there's a huge opportunity for us to walk into this market, if you will, this group of students, and introduce them to college and what it means to go to college. But I also, we are located in Pueblo, Colorado, which has a long history of blue collar steel mill manufacturing. My community produces the steel that builds much of America, and so we are incredibly proud of our heritage and our blue collar background. We're a community that has a work ethic. We're not afraid to work and work hard, but we're also a community that's not a university going culture. Because of that. And as you well know, the steel mill industry has changed considerably. And so we're having to retool in Pueblo, Colorado, and diversify our economic bandwidth to the newer economies. That requires making sure that we educate our workforce. And so all of this it's twofold. One, it is walking into high schools, and it is our ability to articulate to young people who do not have an understanding or a history of higher education, and telling that story in such a way that is meaningful and that is motivational, that allows them to see that they too are college material and they too can go on and do something other than being a steel worker. Nothing against it, but those jobs are becoming fewer and fewer as we diversify the economic and the employment sectors moving forward. And so we have to work with family members. We have got to work with grandparents. We're a diverse community with a lot of Hispanic families, and that means more than just talking to the student. That means talking to mom and dad and to grandparents. And in fact, we've recently gone into home visits where we go into the home and we talk about what it means to go to college to all family members. And we're doing that. And so the People's University it's where the rubber hits the road. It is a high touch solution. We have an opportunity. My goal is to make sure that in Pueblo, Colorado, there's a CSU Pueblo credential hanging on the wall in every home in the city of Pueblo. And if we can do that, we can change the trajectory of these families and these young people and change the trajectory of our city and, more importantly, the state.
Dr. White Davis, going back to you for a moment. As the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Extended Studies and a critical player in overseeing the UTCs, could you please share what are you most proud of that the UTCs have accomplished, and what is your vision for the future of the UTCs?
So the first thing I'm the most proud about is that what I sort of spoke of before is that we're increasing the number of track centers, outside of Pueblo, Colorado, because I think that we're demonstrating that it's working, that we're developing students' mindsets that college is an opportunity that they could pursue. We're seeing an uptick in enrollment at CSU Pueblo, particularly from Pueblo County, which I think is just, again, reminding our students, our local community, that there is a premier institution in their backyard that is invested in their success. But also to add to that is, a consistent reminder that we're there to help them solve problems, figure this out, answer sort of multiple questions, meet with their parents, meet with their grandparents, facilitate them coming to campus and taking a tour, like all of those like little micro steps that lead towards a decision. But I'm also like really proud of the idea that what I actually believe that anyone who wants to go to college should get to go, right? And so we are really holding that investment in access. I mean, we aren't a fully access institution, but we're working to, making that a priority and helping students see that this is a pathway to, an economic mobility for their families, for themselves, for our community. And so I'm proud of that. I think we've taken some steps as a team to think about what would be the best strategies for increasing visibility and listening to our district partners about what helps. And one of the first things that we did in the last year was making sure that we set specific days. We only have one person per district, right? So, and there's a lot of need. So we want to be careful that we set like Mondays is at this school, Tuesdays at this school, Wednesdays, and making sure that we keep that schedule, because that's when students come. So marketing the schedule, conveying the access to counselors and answering questions, being accessible to teachers, also sharing. So making sure that our UTC coordinator in the school is working directly with admissions counselors to like make that transition as seamless as possible for those seniors. Those are some really it sounds like, well, obviously we should have done that. But when you're investing in a new project, there's so much excitement that, then it also became easier in many ways for the coordinator to stay kind of housed at the main location, right? And then what we heard was, well, these other schools were not benefiting in the same way at the district level. So it became imperative that we work towards building consistent opportunities for the coordinator to go to multiple schools or to share responsibility with other admissions counselors, so that we can be there in other highlight ways, or and also like that coordinator helps relay important information to our academic programs. Like If there's going to be a big DECA competition, then maybe the business school or the business advisors can get connected to them. So it sort of builds that like communication pipeline directly from admissions to academics to student life to housing to and inviting students to our campus for like other student life activities, so that we can take away the perception that this isn't for everyone. We want everyone to feel safe to come here, and that they have an opportunity to grow here, and that there's like that you don't have to just be one kind of student to succeed here. That there's lots of activities. So I think one of the, making a schedule that seems obvious, but was something we've kind of really tried to focus on. We've also tried to build a lot of after hours events. And so then after hours for families and parents to come. And that again is a district collaboration. They own the building, they have the keys. So it's making sure that you develop like a very clear sort of single point of communication on both sides, so that you can facilitate making sure that we're, doing the right thing, inviting people into a building that's not ours, but also knowing that we are welcome there. I'd also add that like we've been bringing financial aid into the buildings, into the Track Center. We have like highlighted financial aid counselor days to answer questions. And I think it just sparks an opportunity for conversation and information. So working more in collaboration with financial aid and our community partners, I think that's one of the things that we've done that's been really great.
This next question is for all three of you. What are some key takeaways and advice for other colleges and universities looking to begin their journeys and potentially start their own UTCs?
Yeah, you've got to reach the family. This is not you got to reach the students, but the influence stems deep within these families. That includes grandparents, cousins, extended family. It's a unit. It's a system that is incredibly important. And you've got to figure that out, and you've got to understand that. And more importantly, you've got to value it.
I think that it's having best practice would be to have someone who's excited about the idea of helping people go to college, right? And that again seems obvious, but they have to be excited about helping people go to college. And that doesn't mean just going to CSU Pueblo. They have to be thinking about all the multitudes of questions that might be coming. They have to be willing to help people figure out how to navigate the scholarship page at the University of California and figure out other pieces, right? So it's also someone who's willing to learn and figure things out and realize that it's not like everything in higher ed. If you do something at CSU Pueblo, it's going to be the same somewhere else. That's not true. So they have to also be willing to like navigate different complex websites and develop relationships and reach out. And so it needs to sort of have some outgoing pieces. You can't be, and you have to be willing to work with high school students and be patient with sort of the like a secondary culture, right? Like that, where you're like that whole piece of living in a high school, but not being a part of the high school, and then building relationships. I think logistically, you got to have like, days and times for support. You need to build also that person needs to build a relationship individually with the principal and the counselors. And if it's like a single person working in multiple places, then they have to be consistent with their messaging and be, showing up when they say they're going to show up, because they are relying on that. And that's really important for building relationships. So, Tim says this all the time. It's not a high tech, it's really high touch. And it is high touch. It's actually saying like, you can do this and you're smart enough to do this. And we're here to help you, and being genuine and authentic with that messaging. And it's having to say it over and over and over again, and not feeling like impatient with yourself or the person who came for help.
Not to reiterate too much of what was said, but obviously someone who is, of course, enthusiastic, but also someone who knows how to navigate, how to interact and engage with students from a variety of backgrounds. It's also so important to know all of the technicalities that go behind higher education, how to navigate that. But at the end of the day, you are still going to be working with students. And I think having that relationship-oriented piece is so valuable because they need to be able to recognize and respect and honor so many different types of students, so many different types of experiences, and how that relates to a college-going experience. So that'd be the only thing that I would add when you're looking for somebody to represent a university track center. You want to have someone who can navigate all of those, but also have the social strengths and skills to be able to navigate that as well.
What have you learned from your experience, and what would you like to share with our listeners?
We talk about this, I talk about this with prospective students, is that when you're going into college, and I think the track center coordinators do this well, as you embark upon your college career, our job is to help you become who you need to become as a person. And I always say it's out of no disrespect to your mom and dad or your grandparents or your friends or your peer group, but this is about you and who you need to become. And we're here to help you kind of facilitate that conversation to make sure that we get this right. You know, our goal is for you to be happy, to have a successful career. And sometimes the external influence is so great that we really never get to what the student wants. And so through these more personal conversations, I believe you can get to what the student is wanting. And if you can tap into what the student wants, your chances of not only getting that student to enroll, but to persist with you is going to be greater than them chasing a dream of their parents or their grandparents. And I think we've all kind of been there. And so we try to get them to honor themselves and their goals and their dreams. And that dreams are not just pie in the sky. This is the time when you can really articulate a dream, and we're there to kind of help you chart that course forward.
To our institutions who are thinking about doing this, what I would tell you is you have to really be invested in the success of the community you live in. And it's not just time, it's a monetary investment. CSU Pueblo, it's a staff member of CSU Pueblo that does this work. I mean, our hosts give us a space, but we decorate it, like all of that actually, and then just it's time and commitment. And so I just say that, like, you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is, which is we want students to go to college, but you have to be where the students are to make that happen. And that's what I would advocate for you to try to figure that out, because I think it will have dividends when you do it, but it does take time and money.
And I would also add, as a direct byproduct of the University Track Centers, I am a living, breathing example of the impact that it has, and I'm happy to always share it. And I think my story should inspire anybody who's looking to start a University Track Center, and any student that's listening to this wondering, what does this mean for me? You know, I have grown so much as a person from 18 to now 23 years old. So it's been great. And I can thank the UTC for that.
Thank you again to all three of you for joining us. We're looking forward to sharing more inspiring stories like yours and continuing the conversation surrounding the value of a college education. This has been the Ask You Telling Our Story podcast. As we continue this series, we will share stories from Ask You members who have taken bold steps to successfully support underserved students and their communities. Please get the word out about this important work by sharing this podcast with colleagues, teachers, students, family, and friends. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, and many other podcast platforms. If you are an Ask You member with a promising practice that you wish to share, please visit AskYouTellingOurStory.org. Thank you for listening. Until next time.